At the law office, everything was ready for Leah to sign the papers. That was when a cleaning lady approached, discreetly slipped a dirty rag into her hands, and whispered, "Open it in the restroom, away from your husband." Confused, Leah did as she was told, and when she unfolded that old rag, she saw what was hidden inside. The morning did not start with the alarm clock, but with Roger already up, standing in front of the closet in his t-shirt and jeans, picking out her clothes. Leah half opened her eyes, saw his back tight with concentration, and immediately understood. Today was the day he had been talking about all week, the day at the notary public. Roger turned around, offered a brief smile, and tossed a dark gray skirt and a gray blouse onto the bed. "Get up, sweetheart. We need to be downtown by 10. Wear this. It makes you look serious." Leah sat up in bed and put her bare feet on the cold floor. The apartment smelled like yesterday's beef stew and the strong, expensive cologne her husband had started wearing more often. "Can I think about it a little more?" Leah said in a low voice, her back to him. "After all, it is a piece of my mother. Are you going to start this again?" Roger stopped at the bedroom door. He turned, and his face adopted that patient expression, like a doctor dealing with a difficult patient. "Leah, we have talked about this 1,000 times. What piece? It is just debt, not an asset. Do you understand the word debt?" He sat on the low ottoman in front of her and took her hands in his. His hands were warm, well manicured, his nails neatly trimmed. "Your dad's company is going under. The suppliers are already drawing up lawsuits. The bank is going to audit them any day now. And do you know who they are going to drag down first? You. You have 35% in your name. You sign today, and we close the book on this. If you do not sign, we will be bouncing from law office to courthouse until we retire. Is that what you want?" Leah shook her head slowly. She did not know what she wanted. She wanted a cup of coffee. She wanted her mother to be alive to explain what to do with these papers. "And my dad? What does he say?" Leah asked. "Your dad? Your dad?" Roger sighed and let go of her hands. "I have told you 1,000 times. He specifically asked to handle this quietly, without making a scene. He doesn't have the headspace for you right now. The business is burning down. If you call him, he will not answer. You know how he is. The machines were always more important than your mother. Now he is doing the exact same thing to you." Something inside Leah trembled. She wanted to reply that her mother used to say her father simply did not know how to show love the right way, that he kept all his feelings bottled up, that his hands were always covered in machine grease, but his heart was tender. But Roger had already gone to the kitchen, and from there came the sound of the kettle whistling and cups clinking. Leah stood up and walked to the window. The courtyard was a dull gray, late autumn, wet leaves glued to the asphalt by the rain. On the bench near the entrance sat their neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, wearing a plastic rain hood, feeding the pigeons. Leah watched her and thought that Mrs. Higgins knew nothing about corporate shares or liability contracts. Her grandson had just gotten into a trade school, and she was perfectly happy. "Leah, come eat breakfast," Roger called from the kitchen. "I made grilled cheese and poured your tea. I added peppermint. Just the way you like it." How strange, Leah thought. Over the last month, her husband had become incredibly attentive. It used to be her running around him in the morning, finding his socks, ironing his dress shirts. Now he was the one serving tea, picking out her outfits, kissing her on the forehead, and calling her sweetheart so often she had almost gotten used to it. But in the back of her mind, a nagging thought lingered. This sudden tenderness was somehow tied to the papers resting inside the black leather briefcase on the hallway table. In the kitchen, the table was already set. A cheese sandwich cut into neat squares, a steaming mug of tea. Roger was sitting across from her, scrolling through his cell phone, smiling at the screen every now and then. "Who are you texting?" Leah asked, taking a bite of her sandwich. "It is Rick, confirming what time he is getting there. Says the traffic downtown is awful." Rick Miller was her father's business partner, the man Roger had grown so close to over the past year, acting like they were old college buddies. "Rick," Leah repeated. "You call him Rick now. Is there a problem?" Roger looked up. "He is a good guy. Besides, he is not taking your shares for free. He feels bad for you. It is not exactly a cash windfall for him. He just wants to pull us out of the hole. Not everyone would do that." Leah nodded. The tea was way too sweet. The peppermint could not mask the heavy taste of sugar. "Can I at least hear my dad's voice on the phone before I sign?" Roger placed his phone face down on the table. "Leah, you know how this looks from the outside. You go 2 years without calling him, and now, out of the blue, you call him on the exact day you are supposed to sign. What is he going to think? That you are sniffing around for money?" What money? Leah muttered. You just said there is nothing but debt. Exactly. And calling him will just twist the knife. Sign the papers, and then, in a month or two, you call him when things settle down and have a real conversation. Roger stood up, walked around the table, leaned down, and kissed the top of her head. I love you. I just want us out of this mess. Leah nodded again. Contradicting him meant she did not trust him, and all he had done lately was take care of her. She washed her mug, put on the dark gray skirt, the gray blouse, and a dark trench coat over it. She stood in front of the hallway mirror for a long time without recognizing herself. 42 years old. People used to call her beautiful. Now she looked at her own reflection and thought, what good is beautiful when you just look like a tired, worn-out woman? Let's go. Roger was already standing by the door with the briefcase. The car is out front. In the elevator, Roger was furiously typing on his phone, then held it up to his ear. Rick, we are heading out. We will be there in 20 minutes. Wait outside. Do not go in without us. His voice was all business, light, almost cheerful. In the car, Roger turned on the radio. Soft, instrumental music played. Through the window, the gray American city rolled by. Bus stops with weathered benches. Chain pharmacies with bright neon signs. Strip malls. At a red light, they stopped for a moment. Leah stared at an old woman dragging a wire shopping cart and remembered that her mother had owned the exact same one with a plaid liner. When her mother died, Leah threw that cart into the dumpster on the third day. Roger had told her, there is no need to fill the apartment with useless junk. Why are you so quiet? Roger asked, thinking about my mom. Roger sighed and put his hand on her knee. Leah, once we sign this, are you going to let it go? Then, finally, we can actually start living. Leah did not answer. There was a heavy pressure in her chest, like the air right before a severe thunderstorm. She remembered how her mother, right before going into hospice, already so frail, her hands almost translucent, had gripped Leah's wrist and said, Leah, that share is mine to give to you. Do not give it to anyone. Anyone. Especially if they try to smooth talk you into it. It is your protection, and it is your father's protection. Do you understand? At the time, Leah thought her mother was just delirious from the heavy pain medication. Now, those words came rushing back, tightening around her throat. The notary office was located in an historic brick building on a downtown corner. It used to be a local county clerk's office, then a regional bank, and now a corporate law and notary firm. Waiting by the heavy glass doors, just as promised, was Rick Miller, wearing a dark wool peacoat and a fine cashmere scarf. Leah, sweetheart, good morning. Are we ready? Do not worry, this will only take 10 minutes. He spoke with a smooth politeness, but his eyes were like those of an exhausted accountant, calculating and sharp. Leah forced a smile and nodded. They entered the building and walked up a wide, worn marble staircase to the second floor. On the landing, there was a plaque that read Quiet Please, and a large potted monstera plant on a rolling base. In the hallway, a few people were already sitting on a long wooden bench. An elderly couple holding a manila folder. A young guy in a hoodie. The air smelled of old dust, floor wax, and a faint hint of stale coffee drifting from the open reception door. In the corner buzzed an ancient water cooler, one of its side panels held together with silver duct tape. Wait out here, Rick said. Roger and I are going in to review the final draft with the notary so you can just walk in, sign, and be done with it. Why can't I go in? Leah asked in a soft voice. Of course you can, Roger replied without looking at her. But why sit through all the boring legal jargon? Sit down, take a load off for 5 minutes. He gave her a gentle nudge toward the bench. Leah sat down. Rick and Roger walked over to one of the heavy oak doors, knocked, and vanished inside. Leah placed her purse on her lap and wrapped both hands around it. A strange, pulling sensation gripped her right below her ribs, as if she had waded into a lake and suddenly realized her feet could no longer touch the bottom. She stared at the painted plaster walls of the hallway, the old brass light fixture on the ceiling, unable to believe that in just a few minutes, she was going to sign away her mother's legacy to a complete stranger. Well, not a stranger, to her father's partner who supposedly felt sorry for her. That was when an older, short woman appeared at the far end of the hall. She wore a gray uniform smock over a knit sweater. In one hand, she held a commercial mop bucket on wheels. In the other, a worn-out rag. Her white hair was tied back in a simple bandana, and she wore thick-soled rubber work shoes. She pushed the bucket slowly down the hallway, stopping to scrub scuff marks off the floor. There was something familiar about this cleaning lady's face. The deep creases around her mouth, her kind eyes with heavy lids. She reminded Leah of someone, The woman lifted her head, locked eyes with Leah, and froze for a fraction of a second, the briefest moment, like someone recognizing a ghost. Then she looked away and kept mopping with steady, practiced strokes. The sharp chemical smell of industrial bleach rose from the bucket. "Excuse me, I will move my feet out of your way," Leah said softly, pulling her knees back. "Leave it. Leave it," the woman muttered without looking up. Her voice was low, slightly raspy. "Are you here for the notary?" "Yes, for an inheritance." Leah was surprised by the personal question but nodded anyway. "I am here to sign." "Yes, to transfer my shares to my dad's business partner." The woman went completely still. The squeaking of the mop on the floor stopped, then started again. "And where is your father?" she asked, even quieter. "He didn't come. My husband is handling everything." The woman did not reply. She just took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, like someone who had just made a very dangerous decision. She pushed the bucket toward the far end of the hall. Leah leaned back against the wooden bench and closed her eyes. Her head felt incredibly heavy. Her temples were pounding. Light, cautious footsteps approached. Leah opened her eyes. The cleaning lady was standing directly in front of her. In her hands was the same rag, gray, dusty, crumpled, rolled into a tight ball, covered in dark, set-in stains. The woman's face was hard, resolute, and yet completely terrified. "Take this," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "What?" Leah stammered in confusion. "Why would I want a dirty rag?" "Take it," the woman repeated, and with a lightning-fast motion, she shoved the crumpled rag directly into Leah's hands. The cleaning lady shot a nervous sideways glance at the security camera mounted on the ceiling, then leaned in even closer. "Open it in the restroom, but do not do it in front of your husband. Please." Leah opened her mouth to ask a question, but the woman had already straightened up, grabbed the handle of her mop bucket, and hurried away, moving as if the conversation had never happened. Leah sat completely frozen, holding the rag as if it were a burning piece of coal. Her heart delivered a massive, echoing thump against her ribs. The elderly couple next to her was busy arguing over their own paperwork. No one had noticed a thing. "Open it in the restroom, but do not do it in front of your husband." The words spun wildly in her head. In front of her husband. The man currently sitting behind that heavy oak door with Rick, reviewing her surrender. The man who had kissed her forehead 3 times that morning and called her sweetheart. Leah stood up. Her knees were trembling slightly. She shoved the rag under her trench coat, pinning it against her side with her elbow, walked up to the receptionist, and quietly asked where the restroom was. The receptionist pointed down the hall to the left. Inside the restroom, it was dead silent, smelling of cheap lavender air freshener and heavy bleach. One of the stalls was occupied. Leah walked into the other one, slid the metal lock shut, hung her purse on the hook, and stood perfectly still for a second, listening to the sound of her own ragged breathing. Then she pulled out the rag and began carefully unrolling it. Leah's fingers were shaking. Deep inside the fabric was something hard and small. She peeled back the final layer of dirty cloth, and a small black plastic USB flash drive dropped into her palm. There was a strip of white athletic tape stuck to the side of it. On the tape, written in black ink with hurried handwriting, was a single word: Leah. Before signing, Leah stared at the flash drive, her fingers slowly turning ice cold. In the stall next to her, a toilet flushed. High heels clicked across the tile toward the sink. Leah stood completely motionless until the footsteps faded and the heavy restroom door swung shut. Then she opened her purse, unzipped the hidden interior pocket, dropped the flash drive inside, zipped it back up, folded the dirty rag, and shoved it deep into her coat pocket. Her mind was a ringing void, echoing with a single, deafening command. "Do not sign, do not sign, do not sign." She walked out of the stall and went over to the sink. Staring back at her from the mirror was a pale woman with dark gray circles under her eyes. Leah splashed freezing water on her face and patted it dry with a paper towel. "All right," she told herself mentally. "I am not signing anything today." She stepped back out into the hallway. Roger was already standing by the office door. He looked incredibly satisfied, totally relaxed. Seeing her, he took a step forward. "Where did you run off to, Leah?" "Come on in, we reviewed everything. It is airtight." Leah stopped right in front of him, placed a hand flat against her stomach, and doubled over slightly. "Roger, I feel awful. I am so dizzy." Roger's face instantly went rigid. His smug smile vanished in a fraction of a second. "What do you mean, dizzy? Are you crazy? The notary is waiting." "I can't do it right now," she said, keeping her voice low but completely firm. "The whole room is spinning. How am I supposed to sign a legal document in this state?" Roger shot a frantic look back at the office door. His jaw clenched tight. He leaned in close, dropping his voice to a vicious, venomous hiss. Do you understand what you are doing? Are you trying to make me look like a fool? Rick is not going to wait around. Roger, I am going to pass out right here on the floor. Leah leaned her shoulder heavily against the wall. I cannot sign today. The door opened, and Rick stepped out, holding his reading glasses and a slim manila folder. He immediately put on a mask of deep concern. What is wrong, Leah? Are you feeling ill? My head, Leah murmured. I am sorry. Everything is spinning. Rick looked at Roger over the rim of his glasses. A split-second glance, but absolutely freezing. Roger understood the cue. He immediately shifted his tone, his voice turning sickeningly soft, almost alien. Of course, sweetheart. Health comes first. We will reschedule. Tomorrow or the next day, you can sign when you feel better. Right? Rick? Absolutely, absolutely. Rick nodded in agreement. The important thing is that you get some rest. Roger gripped her elbow tightly and steered her toward the stairs. Over his shoulder, he muttered something in a low voice to Rick. It sounded like an apology. Leah barely heard him. Inside, her entire focus was zeroed in on one single thing. The small black flash drive sitting in the zipper pocket of her purse. It was raining outside. Roger popped open an umbrella over her and guided her to the car. Leah carefully pulled her elbow free. I am going to order an Uber. I just need a minute to myself. I will head home alone. I want to stop by the pharmacy on the way. Please. He stopped and stared at her, his eyes practically scanning her for a lie. Leah held his gaze for as long as she physically could. You are acting weird, Roger said slowly. Are you sure you are okay? I just feel sick. I am going home. I am going to lie down, and I will call you. He hesitated, then raised his hand to hail a passing yellow cab. The taxi pulled over to the curb. Roger leaned into the window and barked their home address to the driver. Take it easy. The lady is not feeling well. Roger slammed the door shut, and the cab pulled away into traffic. A few seconds later, Leah leaned forward against the plastic divider. Excuse me, can I change the destination? Not to my house. I need to go to 14 Maple Street, right next to the bank and the jewelry store. The driver shrugged. I know where it is. No problem, lady. The cab took a sharp turn at the next light. Leah gripped her purse with both hands, feeling the hard plastic square through the fabric. Through the rain-streaked window, wet bus stops and gray storefronts blurred past, and inside Leah, only one thought kept beating in time with the windshield wipers. Before signing, before signing, before signing. The local print and shipping shop on Maple Street was tiny, with two large display windows, wedged tightly between a Chase Bank and a watch repair store. Leah pushed the heavy glass door open. A small brass bell chimed above her head. Inside, it smelled of hot toner cartridges and cheap drip coffee from a machine in the corner. Standing behind the counter was Chloe, a woman in her early 30s with a messy bob and thin wire-rimmed glasses. Chloe had worked with Leah back in the accounting department of a logistics firm before leaving to start her own small business. They still texted each other on major holidays and occasionally grabbed lunch. Chloe looked up from her computer monitor and smiled in surprise. Leah. Oh my God, what happened to you? Leah's voice was trembling violently. Chloe, please. I need you to open this flash drive on your computer and print everything on it right now. Fast. But I need you to do it where nobody can see. Chloe studied her face intently, set her cell phone down, and stood up. I don't have any customers. Come on back here. Leah hurried around the main counter and collapsed into a squeaky rolling chair next to Chloe. She pulled the flash drive from her purse. Her hands were shaking so badly that the little black piece of plastic slipped through her fingers twice. Chloe took the drive in total silence and plugged it into her desktop tower. A window popped up on the screen showing 4 folders. Okay, what are we looking for? Chloe asked in a hushed tone. I don't know. Everything. Just do not close it if something awful pops up. There were 4 folders: financials, debts, letters, audio. Chloe double-clicked the first one. Inside were PDF files bearing the official letterhead of Davis Textiles, Leah's father's company. Leah recognized the logo instantly, the exact one her mother had drawn with India ink on their kitchen table decades ago. Chloe opened the first document. It was a quarterly financial report. Revenue, overhead, net profit. Leah leaned closer to the glowing screen. The profits were incredibly stable, and on the bottom line were numbers that made Leah's throat go bone dry. The company was not going under. Not even close. On the contrary, there was a separate line item on the ledger. Supply contract for professional medical scrubs, Regional Healthcare Network. The contract was signed just 2 months ago. The dollar amount had 6 figures. What the hell is this? Chloe whispered, angling the monitor toward her. Leah, your dad's company is rolling in cash. Leah nodded, completely mute. Her eyes were burning. She remembered how just the night before, Roger had shoved a printed spreadsheet in her face, a chaotic mess of red numbers, yelling at her, "Look at this. See? The suppliers are suing. By next month, the state is going to seize the assets." She had felt so guilty. She had believed him because she did not understand a single thing on those spreadsheets. Chloe opened the second folder. Debts. Here were the exact same lawsuits Roger had shown her at home. Court forms, state seals, angry signatures. Except now, Chloe highlighted the names of the supplier companies and quickly pasted them into a web browser on her other monitor. Wait a second. Apex Logistics LLC was registered in Delaware exactly 6 months ago. The physical address is a strip mall mailbox. Northway Supply? Same thing. The registered agent is the exact same guy who owns Apex. Leah swallowed a lump of pure panic. Chloe was not a corporate lawyer, but after 15 years in accounting, she had seen her fair share of shell companies. The look on Chloe's face was the look of a doctor who suddenly realizes they are not just looking at a sick patient, but a terminal diagnosis. Open the next one, Leah pleaded. Third folder. Letters. High-resolution scans of envelopes with canceled postage stamps. Sheets of notebook paper covered in a large, slightly slanted handwriting. Leah recognized that handwriting the second she saw it. She had a shoebox full of it in her closet at home, old birthday cards from her mother signed in that exact script, except the signature at the bottom of these letters was different. Love, Dad. Chloe silently opened the first letter. Leah leaned so close, her nose almost touched the glass. My dearest Leah, I do not know why you refuse to answer me. If I did something to hurt you, please come by. Let's just talk. The factory does not matter to me more than you do. The truth is, I just do not know how to apologize the right way. You know how I am. I never knew how to say the right words to your mother either. She just put up with me. I always thought you understood me without needing the words. It turns out I was a fool. Please come over, even just for an hour. Below that was a smeared, wrinkled spot on the paper, where it looked like a heavy drop of water had fallen on the ink. Leah shoved her chair back from the desk and clamped both hands over her mouth. Chloe stayed completely quiet and simply pushed a cardboard box of tissues across the desk. When Leah finally finished reading, she had to force the words out of her throat. Chloe scrolled down the screen. On the scans, right below the text, someone had written dates in the same handwriting. 18 months ago. A year ago. 8 months ago. 3 months. The final one was dated 2 months ago. 6 letters. 6 desperate letters that Leah had never seen. 6 letters her father had written, stamped, and apparently mailed, that had somehow vanished into thin air before ever reaching her hands. Leah slowly, as if moving underwater, reached out and traced her finger across the monitor, as if trying to touch her father's ink. Chloe, open the last one. Audio. Chloe clicked. Inside were 3 MP3 files with short, random numeric names. Chloe double-clicked the first one. A voice spilled out of the cheap computer speakers. First, there was background noise, the clatter of silverware, espresso machines steaming milk, the low hum of a crowded coffee shop. Then, Roger's voice. The exact same voice that had called her sweetheart and served her peppermint tea just a few hours ago. Listen, Rick, she is going to sign it. I have been working her over on this for 2 solid years. She does not even know if her old man loves her or hates her anymore. I have fed her so much garbage about him that now she practically bursts into tears just hearing the word factory. A second voice chimed in, deep, smooth, with a slight wheeze. Rick Miller. Roger, you just keep her nice and calm until we get to the law office so she does not get cold feet in the Uber. You know how women are. They call their mothers, their girlfriends. She has no girlfriends. She is basically a house cat. At night, I just take her phone away. I tell her we need a digital detox, time away from screens. She actually thanks me for it. A short, cruel, masculine chuckle echoed from the speakers. And what about your father-in-law? Roger asked. I will handle old man Davis myself, Rick replied smoothly. I will tell him his precious daughter voluntarily surrendered her shares, that she wants absolutely nothing to do with him, and that she signed the papers without shedding a single tear. He can punch a hole in the drywall all he wants, but he will not do a damn thing. He is totally isolated, just a dead tree waiting to fall. And my 8 grand? You cutting the check after the transfer goes through? No. Before. Chloe slammed the spacebar, pausing the playback. The print shop was dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the desktop tower fan, and outside on the street, the distant blast of a semi-truck air horn. Leah sat completely frozen, staring blankly at a smudge on the monitor bezel. Her mind felt like a house where all the lights had just been blown out by a power surge. I have been working her over for 2 years. At night I take her phone. She is basically a house cat. 1,000 tiny details suddenly came rushing back. Like last year, when Roger told her that her dad had called the landline just to scream that he never wanted to see her face again. How her birthday cards in the mail had suddenly stopped coming. Roger had shrugged and blamed the incompetent postal workers putting mail in the wrong boxes. How she had once dialed her dad's number from her cell phone. Nobody answered. And Roger later claimed her dad had blocked her number. How her phone somehow always ended up charging on Roger's nightstand every single night. So you don't get addicted to doom scrolling, sweetheart. Chloe, Leah said, her voice sounding like gravel. Print everything. Every financial statement, every letter, the list of those fake shell companies, and copy the audio files onto a separate flash drive. I only have the one you gave me. I will give it back. I am going to make 2 copies right now. Chloe was already digging through a desk drawer, pulling out a handful of brand new flash drives in plastic packaging, and I am backing all this up to my secure cloud server. I will text you the password. The heavy-duty laser printer roared to life. One hot sheet of paper after another spat into the output tray. Chloe worked in absolute silence, moving with the rapid clinical precision of a trauma nurse in an ER. Suddenly, the front door bell chimed. A guy in a work jacket walked in holding a $20 bill. Chloe stood up and said with total calm, "I am so sorry, sir. Our network is down for maintenance. We will be back up in an hour." The man grumbled and walked out. Chloe immediately threw the deadbolt and flipped the open sign to closed. When the final page dropped into the tray, Leah was holding a thick stack of 40 documents. Chloe slid them into a rigid cardboard FedEx envelope, sealed it tight, handed it to Leah, and pressed a brand new silver flash drive into her palm. "Where are you going now?" Leah looked down at the heavy envelope in her hands. And for the first time in months, the word dad did not make her feel like she was going to collapse. "To my dad's house." Chloe nodded. She did not say a word, just reached out and squeezed Leah's shoulder hard. Leah walked out of the print shop. The rain was coming down harder now. The slick pavement reflected the headlights of passing cars. She flagged down a beat-up local transit shuttle at the corner, the one that ran out toward the county limits, near the industrial park where Arthur Davis lived in a small subdivision. The shuttle smelled of wet wool coats, diesel fuel, and something domestic, like someone carrying a box of warm pastries. Leah sat in the very back by a streaked window, clutching the cardboard envelope tight against her chest with both hands. Outside, the gray American landscape rolled by. Muddy fields, flattened yellow grass, bare trees, deep puddles filling the potholes in the road. Halfway there, she pulled out her cell phone. Her thumb hovered over his contact name. Dad. For years, she had been terrified of that name. She pressed call. Long rings. 1, 2, 3. Leah was just about to hit end when the line suddenly clicked. Static. A little choppy. A long, heavy silence. The only sound was ragged breathing. "Leah?" His voice cracked and faded. "Is it really you, honey? I am on my way to you. I am on the county bus. I will be there in 40 minutes. Are you at the house?" "I am. I am home. Are you coming alone?" "Alone." Silence again. Then a rough, familiar cough. The exact cough he always let out right before saying something incredibly important. "I will put a pot of coffee on, honey." And he hung up. Leah sat staring at her phone, pressing it against her cheek. A retired woman sitting 2 rows ahead kept glancing back at her discreetly. When the bus finally pulled into the intersection near the subdivision, the rain had reduced to a light drizzle. Leah stepped off and looked around. Her dad's house was about 300 yards down a badly paved, pothole-riddled road. She walked fast, still hugging the envelope to her chest. On either side were chain-link fences, old oak trees, someone's backyard greenhouse, mud-splattered pickup trucks parked on lawns. The house was the exact same one she grew up in. A single-story brick ranch with a detached garage and a large picture window looking into the kitchen. Above the front porch, a single yellow bug light burned inside a frosted glass fixture. Next to the door sat a pair of muddy, steel-toed Red Wing boots. Leah walked up the 3 concrete steps. But before she could even knock, the door swung open. Standing in the threshold was her father. He looked so much older. His hair was completely white now, not just at the temples but all over. His face was deeply lined, with dark, heavy bags under his eyes. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt and a worn-out fleece vest he must have bought a decade ago. But it was him. Leah recognized him instantly. He looked at his daughter slowly, staring at her as if she were a ghost. His jaw trembled. "You really came alone?" Arthur asked in a hushed, fragile voice. Leah wanted to say something, but the air caught painfully in her throat. She simply took a step forward and buried her face into his shoulder. Her father went completely rigid for a second, like a wooden board, then hesitantly raised his thick arms and wrapped them tightly around her. He smelled of dial soap, motor oil, and old wool. It was the exact smell of her childhood. They stood there in the doorway for a long time. Then he gently pulled back and wiped a hand roughly across his eyes. "You are freezing. Come inside, honey." "I was frying up some hash browns. When you said you were coming, I threw them in the cast iron with bacon grease, just like your mom used to do." Inside, it was incredibly warm. It smelled of fried onions, toasted bread, and the faint medicinal scent of Bengay from the bathroom cabinet. On the kitchen table sat 2 ceramic mugs, an old drip coffee maker, and a plastic sugar bowl. Everything was exactly as it had been years ago. Leah took off her trench coat and sat at the table. Her dad sat across from her. He just stared at her in total silence, as if terrified that if he spoke, he might say the wrong thing and ruin it all. Leah set the thick cardboard envelope on the table and placed the silver flash drive right on top of it. "Dad," she said in a quiet, trembling voice, "please, you have to read all of this right now. If you do not read it, I am not going to have the strength to say it out loud." He looked at the envelope, then up at his daughter, rubbing his rough thumb against the Formica table. "What is it, Leah?" "The truth, Dad. About me. About you. About Roger. And about Rick." Arthur pulled a pair of cheap wire reading glasses from his shirt pocket, put them on, unspooled the string on the envelope, and pulled out the first stack of papers. They were the letters. His own letters. Right on top was the one that started, "My dearest Leah, I do not know why you refuse to answer me." He stared at his own handwriting for a very long time. Then he raised his eyes to Leah. "Are you seeing these for the first time?" "For the very first time, Dad." Something in his face shifted. He looked like a man who had just had a critical load-bearing nail ripped out of his spine. In total silence, he flipped through the letters. 1, 2, 3. He recognized every single one of them. He tapped them neatly against the table and set them aside. Then he picked up the financial statements, the documents from the Delaware shell companies, the list of fake debts. He recognized those corporate forms, too. "Who the hell are these guys?" he asked in a dead, hollow voice, pointing a thick, calloused finger at one of the LLC names. "These guys showed up in the spring. Rick brought them in himself. Said they were a new textile supplier. It even seemed strange to me because they were shipping out of state, but Rick looked me in the eye and said, 'The margins are way better, Artie. It is a win for the company.' And I signed it. I was a damn fool." He pulled off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let's hear the audio." "Okay." Leah stood up, walked over to an ancient Dell laptop sitting on a small desk against the wall, and plugged in the flash drive. A minute later, Roger's voice echoed through her father's kitchen, the exact same recording she had heard in Chloe's print shop. "I have been working her over for 2 solid years." Arthur sat perfectly still, his head bowed. When the recording reached the part about the $8,000, he clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned bone white. When Rick's voice said, "He is totally isolated. Just a dead tree waiting to fall," her father brought his fist down onto the table. A heavy, silent impact. The ceramic coffee mugs rattled violently. The recording ended. The kitchen fell back into a suffocating silence. On the stove, the bacon grease popped softly in the cast iron skillet. Her dad stood up and clicked off the burner. The hash browns had burned black on the bottom. "I thought you had scrubbed me out of your life, honey," he said, keeping his back turned to her. "I wrote those letters. I drove to the post office and mailed them myself with certified return receipts. The receipts came back in the mail. Somebody signed for them. I thought you were just reading them and ignoring me." 18 months of dead silence. "I called the house phone. Nobody picked up. I called your cell. Sometimes it rang busy. Sometimes it went straight to voicemail. I drove over to your apartment last winter, remember?" Roger opened the door. "He told me you were asleep, asked me not to wake you up, said you had been crying all night because of me, and I just walked away." He stopped and dragged his heavy palm down his face. "And me?" Leah replied softly. "Roger told me that you thought I was a useless burden, that I was ungrateful, that you could not stand the sight of me and you were just waiting for me to sign the papers so you could be done with me. I believed it, Dad. I believed him because Mom was gone, and there was nobody left in my corner to tell me what was real anymore." Arthur slowly sank back into his wooden chair. He stayed quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up, Leah saw a single, thin tear tracing a line down his weathered cheek, leaking like a faucet with a bad gasket. He wiped it away aggressively with the heel of his hand, like swatting a mosquito. Honey, I never pushed you away. I just learned how to keep my mouth shut. I figured you would come around whenever you were ready. Leah stood up, walked over to him, crouched down on the linoleum floor, and took his massive, rough hands in hers. His hands were blazing hot, covered in tiny white scars, the hands of a man who had spent his entire life working on a factory floor. I am here, Dad. He looked down at his daughter, and for the first time in 2 miserable years, he smiled at her. Not a massive, beaming smile for a camera, but the exhausted, genuine smile of a man who suddenly felt a crushing weight lift off his chest, allowing him to finally draw a full breath. Tomorrow, he said, sitting up straighter. Tomorrow, honey, we go to work. We have got a hell of a lot of work to do. Leah nodded. The next morning started early. Roger left for work. He had some meetings with commercial bankers downtown. He was in a rush. He kissed Leah on the forehead, promised to hit the grocery store on his way home to pick up dinner, and pulled the front door shut. Leah waited by the window until his BMW pulled out of the parking garage. She stood there for another full minute, and only then allowed herself to exhale. The entire night had passed like a fever dream. She had lain stiffly in bed next to her husband, staring up at the dark ceiling, counting the agonizing minutes until dawn. Occasionally, Roger would shift in his sleep and mutter something, sleeping the deep, peaceful sleep of a man who believes he holds all the cards. A man whose master plan is going exactly as expected. Every time Roger rolled over, Leah's shoulders locked up in terror. She kept replaying yesterday afternoon at her dad's house on a constant loop in her head. The burnt hash browns, Roger's voice coming through the tinny laptop speakers, the stack of intercepted letters. Before she had taken the Uber back to her apartment, Leah and Arthur had agreed on a very straightforward battle plan. The next day, she would call him the second her husband left for the office, and they would start building an ironclad case. Today, they had to track down the old company accountant before noon, then hit the lawyer's office, and finally, try to contact Martha, the cleaning lady. Her dad had actually called Martha yesterday evening, while Leah was still sitting at his kitchen table. It was one of the hardest moments of the night for him. For a long time, he could not wrap his head around the fact that a USB drive full of explosive corporate espionage had been compiled and handed over by a woman holding a mop. Martha, the woman who has been buffing our floors for 10 years? Hold on, honey, I am calling her. He dialed the number. Martha took a long time to answer. When she finally picked up, Arthur's voice was shaking. Martha, it is Artie Davis. I know everything. Thank you. I need to speak with you. My daughter and I are coming to see you tomorrow. We need to talk in person. You are not going to change your mind, are you? On the other end of the line, Martha answered in a low, steady voice. Mr. Davis, I have been wanting to change my mind for 10 years. Come on over. Leah called her dad first thing in the morning. Arthur answered on the second ring. His voice was gravelly, like a man who had not slept a wink either. Dad, Roger is gone. I am ready. Come pick me up in 40 minutes. But park a block over, by the pharmacy, not in front of my building. You never know if the neighbors are watching. Got it. Leah got dressed quickly, threw on her trench coat, and took the elevator down to the street. The morning air was biting cold, the wet asphalt slick and gleaming, pigeons scattered around the corner trash cans. She walked a block over and stood shivering on the sidewalk. 40 minutes later, a dark gray Ford F-150 pulled up to the curb. It was an unassuming, heavy-duty work truck that Arthur had been driving for 6 years and refused to trade in. As he always said, as long as the engine turns over, we don't mess with it. Hop in, honey. The cab of the truck smelled like spearmint from a cheap pharmacy air freshener hanging on the vent, mixed with the inseparable scent of machine oil that followed her father everywhere. Arthur looked exhausted, with deep purple bags under his eyes. But there was a fire burning in his gaze that had not been there yesterday. Pure, unadulterated resolve. You did not sleep at all, did you? She asked. Neither did you. Let's ride. He threw the truck into drive. The city was just waking up. A bread truck was unloading crates outside a diner. A retired woman was dragging a shopping cart through a crosswalk. Delivery trucks rumbled down the avenue one after another. Arthur drove carefully, keeping strictly to the speed limit. He reached into the center console and pulled out a thick, battered ledger bound in cracked brown leather. He dropped it onto his daughter's lap. I could not sleep. I stayed up all night cross-referencing the old shipping manifests. Look. Leah opened the heavy book. Her dad tapped a thick finger against the handwritten notes without taking his eyes off the road. Apex Logistics. That skinny guy in the baseball cap Rick brought into the office this spring. I remember him now. He kept shoving the vendor contract in my face like a used car salesman. Northway Supply? Rick told me their main distribution warehouses were one state over, right off the interstate. At the time, I asked him, "Can we run a background check on these guys?" Rick just laughed in my face. Said, "Artie, you have got to trust me like you trust yourself. We have been partners for 20 years. And I trusted him, Leah. I listened to him." Leah looked over at him. For the first time in her life, she did not see the strict, towering boss of the factory floor. She saw a man who had been slowly, methodically tangled in a spider web for years. A man who had been handed documents to sign at the exact right moments when he was too busy to read the fine print, manipulated into signing his own death warrant. "Dad, we need an accountant. Someone who actually knows how these books were cooked. Brenda, the old head of accounting. Your mother hired her. Rick fired her 2 years ago. He claimed there were massive discrepancies in her ledgers. I argued with him about it, but I did not push hard enough. I figured Brenda was getting older. Maybe she was just tired and it was time to let her retire. Where is she now?" "At home. Every now and then I would have one of our delivery drivers drop off a cash bonus for her out of my own pocket. She was too proud to take it. But her daughter is sick. She needed the money. We need to go see her first. Then we find Martha. Then the lawyer." Brenda lived in a basic vinyl-sided duplex out in the suburbs. The paint on the front porch was peeling, and dead geraniums sat in plastic pots on the windowsill. When Arthur rang the doorbell, she answered almost immediately, as if she had been standing there waiting. She pulled the door open. She was a short, sturdy woman with sharply cut silver hair, wearing a thick bathrobe over a sweatshirt. When she saw Arthur on the porch, she froze in the doorway. Then she looked at Leah. "Mr. Davis? Is that you?" "I came to see you, Brenda. With my daughter. About some unfinished business. Let us in." She stepped back silently. They walked into a cramped entryway lined with running shoes. The house smelled strongly of fried onions. They sat down in the small kitchen around a circular table covered in a cheap vinyl sunflower tablecloth. Brenda listened to the entire story without interrupting once. The only reaction she gave was her cheeks flushing darker and darker red, the way someone with high blood pressure looks when they are furious. From a bedroom down the hall, a faint, sickly voice occasionally called out. Leah realized it was the sick daughter. When Leah pulled the printed spreadsheets out of the FedEx envelope, the accountant pulled a pair of reading glasses off a chain around her neck and flipped through the pages rapidly, barely needing to pause. She had heavy, confident hands, the hands of someone who had spent her entire life shuffling tax forms. "These accounts," she said, stabbing a finger at a stack of papers. "I flagged these exact accounts back then. I told Rick, you either show me the physical addresses of these warehouses, or I am not entering these invoices into the system." He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Brenda, just enter the numbers. We have an arrangement." And I told him, "You might have an arrangement, but it is my CPA license on the line." A week later, he wrote me up, claiming I had totally botched the payroll taxes on another account. I told him to his face he was committing fraud. He said, "You can walk out the door quietly, or you can get dragged out by security." So I left. She stood up, reached under a wooden hutch in the corner of the kitchen, and dragged out a Nike shoebox wrapped heavily in clear packing tape. I knew someone was going to come asking questions one day. In here are hard copies of everything I managed to print before they locked me out of the server. The actual medical supply contracts, the real vendor lists, the authentic payroll sheets, and all the original shipping manifests from the 6 months right before I got pushed out, before Rick started funneling cash into his fake LLCs. Arthur stared at the shoebox. You could see the muscles in his jaw clenching in pure rage. He placed his massive hand flat on top of the cardboard lid. "I am so sorry, Brenda. I should have believed you back then." "Let it go, Artie," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Right now. Your house is on fire. Where are you heading next?" "To find Martha." Then the lawyer. Martha lived in a rundown, multi-story brick apartment building near the Greyhound bus station. They buzzed her apartment, and within a few minutes, she walked out onto the sidewalk wearing a cheap, dark winter coat, her hair tied back in a bandana, a reusable grocery tote slung over her shoulder. When she spotted Arthur standing by the truck, her lips trembled. She took a step toward him and simply held out both of her empty hands, palms up, like someone offering a candle in the dark. Arthur took her rough hands in his. "Martha, Mr. Davis, I have been waiting a long time for this exact meeting. I am sorry I did not come to you sooner. You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for. Get in the truck." Once they were on the road, Heading toward the law office, Leah turned around in her seat. Martha, why did you pick me out in that hallway? You could have just slipped the flash drive to my dad at the factory. Martha leaned forward from the back seat. Honey, I could not get anywhere near your father. Rick has had him under a microscope for months. Every single move, mister. Davis Maid was being monitored by Rick's people. But you? You were completely off the radar. They were sloppy with you. I figured it out when I was vacuuming the hallway and heard Rick bragging through the drywall about how he was setting up a proxy signature in your name. Something inside my gut just screamed. That is why I took the bus downtown to the notary office that morning. I thought, I will just walk up and explain it to her. But how do you explain a corporate embezzlement scheme in a public hallway with security cameras pointing right at you? So I hid the drive inside a dirty rag. It is the one thing in the world nobody ever pays attention to. Leah looked at this small, weathered woman with her gray hair tucked neatly beneath a bandana and suddenly understood. This woman had not just saved her life. For 2 excruciating years, this woman had carried the crushing weight of someone else's dark secret and refused to let it die in the shadows. Attorney Andrew Hayes saw them immediately. Andy was an old golfing buddy of her father's, a bulldog litigator with 30 years of corporate law experience. His practice was housed in a narrow 3-story brick building downtown. His personal office was cramped, overflowing with law books, towering stacks of manila folders, and a large window looking out onto a massive oak tree. He shook Arthur's hand the way you grip the hand of a brother you have not seen in years, someone you had been deeply worried about. You look like hell, Artie. I am in deep trouble, Andy. I brought my daughter, and I brought a nuke. Sit down and listen. The 4 of them squeezed into the office. Leah, her dad, Brenda, and Martha, who perched quietly on the edge of a leather chair by the door, clutching her tote bag in her lap. Attorney Hayes spread the papers, the silver flash drive, and the contents of Brenda's shoebox across his massive mahogany desk. He put on his reading glasses and went to work like a trauma surgeon. Zero emotion, methodically separating one piece of evidence from the other. He scribbled frantic notes in the margins with a yellow, no, 2 pencil. Once or twice, he let out a low, impressed whistle. Son of a gun. Look at that. When he finally finished cross-referencing everything, he took off his glasses and rubbed his exhausted eyes. All right. Let me give it to you straight, Artie. You own 40% of Davis Textiles. Rick owns 25. Leah inherited her mother's 35. According to your corporate bylaws, any major structural decision requires a 60% majority vote. We all know this. Everyone nodded. So what is Rick's endgame? If Leah signs away her equity, Rick instantly controls 60%. He never has to ask your permission for another damn thing. He calls a board meeting. He fires you as CEO. The new CEO, probably him, then legally transfers the healthcare supply contracts into one of his fake Delaware LLCs. The real money gets funneled out of state. The fake debts from these fraudulent invoices are written off to bankrupt your company. He sells off your heavy machinery for pennies on the dollar back to his own shell companies. In 6 months, you are left holding an empty paper bag and a mountain of federal tax lawsuits. He tapped his pencil hard against the silver flash drive. But this audio recording, it is a smoking gun. He literally outlines the motive, the cash payout, and the embezzlement scheme on tape. It is absolute gold. Leah sat in her chair, her hands clamped tightly between her knees. Every sentence Andy spoke felt like a lead weight dropping onto a scale. So, what is our move today? Attorney Hayes continued, leaning forward. I am taking this straight to the district attorney's white-collar crime division. I am filing a criminal complaint for felony fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit corporate theft. The audio, the intercepted mail, the printed ledgers, and the sworn affidavits from Brenda and Martha will be filed as exhibits. Simultaneously, I am going to petition a judge for an emergency injunction to freeze Leah's shares so nobody can legally transfer them, and I will hit the bank with a cease and desist to freeze all accounts tied to those fake LLCs. And what about Roger? Leah asked, her voice barely a whisper. The lawyer looked at her with genuine pity. Roger is handled separately. Based on the audio and the mail tampering, he is a co-conspirator. If he flips on Rick and testifies, the DA might offer him a plea deal to reduce his prison sentence. But your marriage? That is a personal matter. Right now, we have to sever the corporate artery before the company bleeds out. Leah nodded. She was not even thinking about her marriage yet. Or rather, she was, but from a great distance, like looking down a long, dark hallway at a room she was not ready to enter. Now for the hardest part, Attorney Hayes said, lacing his fingers together on the desk. Half the day is already gone. I can draft the injunction before the courthouse closes, but arrest warrants and search warrants take time. A judge will not sign off in 2 hours. I am going to call Mr. Vance, the notary public handling your transfer. I have known him for decades. I will read him in on the situation. He is not going to schedule anything for tomorrow. We are going to ask him to push the signing to the morning after tomorrow. That gives the DA's investigators 24 hours to secure a search warrant for Rick's office and coordinate a simultaneous sting operation. And until the day after tomorrow, Leah felt her fingertips turning to ice. I have to go back to my apartment. With Roger. Yes. And tomorrow, you have to spend the entire day acting like nothing is wrong. Because if he suspects anything, he will tip off Rick. They will shred the hard drives, burn the paper trails, and we lose half our case. You have to hold the line for 36 hours. The delay until the day after tomorrow is on me. I will call Mr. Vance while you sit right here. Vance will personally call Rick and say, "Gentlemen, I have a family emergency today. We have to bump this to Thursday morning." Rick will not suspect a thing. Notaries are independent officers of the state. Delays happen all the time. Rick will call Roger. Roger will come to you, and all you have to do is sigh and say, "Okay, I guess Thursday is fine. I was already mentally prepared, but whatever. That is it." What if Roger bypasses Rick and calls the notary directly? Leah asked quietly. He will not. He is just the bagman. Rick is running the show. But even if Roger does call, Mr. Vance will stick to the script. I am locking this down with him today. It is his reputation on the line, too. Notaries do not take kindly to people using their offices to commit federal felonies. Her dad reached over and covered her shaking hand with his massive, warm palm. "Honey, if this is too dangerous, we will figure out another way." She looked up at him. "I can hold out for 36 hours. He is not going to suspect a damn thing." "Then we are locked and loaded," Attorney Hayes said, grabbing a legal pad. "Brenda, you stay here with me. We are going to record your sworn deposition right now. I have a dictaphone and a notary stamp in my drawer. Martha, I need you to come to my personal house tomorrow morning, not this office, so nobody sees you walking in here. I will text you the address. Artie, you do not call anyone, especially Rick. If he calls you, you talk about baseball, the weather, and the factory equipment. As far as you are concerned, Leah does not exist today. Understood?" They all nodded. Leah walked out of the law office just as the sun was setting. The sky was bruising purple. Arthur drove her back into the city, dropping her off a block from her apartment building. They rode in almost total silence. Right before she got out, her dad killed the engine and turned to her in the dim cab of the truck. "Leah, 36 hours. I will sleep with my phone in my hand." "I know, Dad." He went quiet. He rubbed his calloused palm aggressively against the leather steering wheel. "And one more thing. I love you so much, honey. I am terrible at saying it, but you needed to hear it." Leah leaned across the center console and kissed his rough, unshaven cheek. "I love you too, Dad." She climbed out of the truck, walked into her building, rode the elevator up, and stood frozen in front of her apartment door for 3 full seconds. She regulated her breathing, plastered on that exhausted, guilty smile Roger was so used to seeing, and turned the key. "Leah?" He walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Where the hell have you been?" I was starting to panic. "I am so sorry." The line at the pharmacy was out the door. Then I sat in a walk-in clinic so they could check my blood pressure, and the doctor told me I just needed to de-stress. I sat on a bench at the park for a while, then got a cup of tea at a diner. I just lost track of time. He walked over, wrapped his arms around her, and kissed her on the forehead. He smelled of instant ramen noodles and that same heavy cologne. "Well, how are you feeling?" "Better. Much better, Roger. I am so sorry about yesterday. I just had a total panic attack. I will sign the papers. I just want this whole nightmare to be over." But the notary called and left a voicemail. He rescheduled us for Thursday. Said he had a scheduling conflict. Roger froze for a split second, his eyes darting back and forth as he processed the information. Then his shoulders dropped, and he nodded smoothly. "Well, Thursday it is. At least it gives us time to relax and prep." "Good girl. I am glad you are feeling better. Go wash up. Dinner is getting cold." She walked into the bathroom, shut the door, and turned on the faucet. Staring at herself in the mirror, she moved only her lips, making absolutely no sound. On a long exhale, she told herself, 36 hours. Just 36 hours. Through the door, she could hear Roger whistling a cheerful tune in the kitchen. He was clattering plates, completely oblivious to the fact that on Thursday morning, he was not going to find his wife's signature at the law office. He was going to find a criminal investigator. The morning of the 4th day started exactly the way Roger liked it. His iPhone alarm chimed a preppy, upbeat marimba melody. He was already up, the coffee maker was brewing, and bagels were in the toaster. Leah registered all of this through a haze of semi-consciousness, keeping her eyes shut tight. She had slept maybe 2 hours total. All night, she had lain rigidly next to her husband, listening to the steady, arrogant rhythm of his breathing, counting the seconds until the sun came up. "Leah, wake up!" Roger strolled into the bedroom, already dressed in a crisp button-down shirt, cleanly shaven, practically glowing with good mood. "We need to be at the notary by 10. I ironed your blue dress for you. You look amazing in it." Leah sat up in bed and dragged a hand across her face. "Thank you, Roger." Her voice came out flat, totally normal. She even surprised herself. Inside, her chest felt like a compressed vacuum, like a patient sitting in a pre-op room who has already signed the surgical consent forms and is just waiting for the gurney to roll in. In the kitchen, he poured her black coffee and handed her a bagel with cream cheese. He sat across from her, watching her eat, smiling gently without a trace of malice. It was the smile of a man who owned the room, a man who had finally pushed a heavy boulder to the top of a very steep hill. "After the notary, we are going straight to the mall," he announced. "I am buying you a brand new winter coat. I cannot stand looking at that depressing gray trench coat anymore. And what do you say we book a vacation? Mexico, beach, sun, margaritas." "Sounds great," Leah said, picking at the crust of her bagel. "Let's do it." The BMW cruised down the exact same gray streets they had driven 2 days ago. The same bus stops, the same CVS pharmacies, the same corner bakery where a little old lady was dragging a wire cart across the crosswalk. Roger drove with one hand on the steering wheel. His other hand held Leah's, his thumb absent-mindedly rubbing her knuckles. Leah stared out the passenger window, mentally counting the red lights. 1, 2, 3. "Do you remember the night we met?" he asked suddenly. "At Tony's wedding? You were wearing a blue dress. I took one look at you across the reception hall and thought, well, I am a goner. That is the one." Leah turned her head and stared at his profile. Strong jawline, perfectly groomed stubble, a tiny birthmark just below his ear. 12 years. She had spent 12 years sleeping next to this man. "I remember," she said quietly. He smiled without taking his eyes off the road. When they pulled up to the historic brick building downtown, Rick's black Mercedes was already parked out front. Rick himself was pacing the sidewalk in his dark pea coat and cashmere scarf, grinning widely, looking like the father of the bride welcoming guests to a wedding reception. "Leah, sweetheart, how are you holding up? You have got some color back in your cheeks today. You look wonderful. Thank you, Rick. I am 100% today." They walked up the same worn marble stairs to the second floor. On the landing, the potted monstera plant was still there. The hallway was empty today. No elderly couple, no kid in a hoodie. Down by the broken water cooler, a lone cleaning woman was slowly mopping the floor with a gray rag. Martha did not even lift her head as they walked by. The receptionist stood up and pushed open the heavy oak door. "Go right on in. Mr. Vance is expecting you." They walked inside. The notary's office was massive, featuring a heavy mahogany desk, tufted leather guest chairs, and a large steel floor safe against the back wall. Mr. Vance, a distinguished older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, gestured to the chairs and slid a thick stack of stapled documents into the center of the desk. "All right, folks, let us review the asset transfer. Grantor, Leah Davis. Grantee, Rick Miller. 35% equity in Davis Textiles. We will review the payment terms." Roger sat down right next to Leah and rested his hand warmly on her knee under the desk. Rick sat across from them, unbuttoning his pea coat, looking deeply relaxed. Leah picked up the heavy brass pen from the desk, pulled the paperwork toward her, and pretended to scan the legal jargon. At that exact second, the sound of heavy, rapidly approaching footsteps echoed out in the hallway. The heavy oak door swung open without anyone knocking. Mr. Vance looked up in mock surprise. First through the door was Martha. No apron. She was wearing a simple winter coat, her hair neatly brushed, holding her canvas tote bag in both hands. Right behind her was Arthur Davis, wearing the exact same faded flannel and fleece vest Leah had cried into 2 days ago. Following them was Attorney Hayes carrying a thick leather briefcase, Brenda, the accountant, and 2 men Leah did not recognize, a 50-year-old man in a windbreaker, and a younger guy in a dark blue police uniform. Roger slowly pulled his hand off Leah's knee, his face drained of all blood, turning the color of wet cement. Rick froze in his chair, his pea coat hanging half open. The smug grin stayed plastered on his face for one agonizing second longer before completely melting away. "Good morning," said the man in the windbreaker, flashing a gold badge. "Investigator Thomas, White Collar Crime Division, District Attorney's Office. Hold off on signing those papers, Mr. Vance." The notary silently laid his pen down on the desk. Attorney Hayes walked right up to the mahogany desk, snapped his briefcase open, spread a stack of files across the polished wood, and placed the silver flash drive dead center. "Gentlemen, before you is the state's evidence regarding a criminal conspiracy to fraudulently seize control of Davis Textiles through the coerced transfer of Leah Davis's equity. Included are certified bank records exposing fraudulent billing from Apex Logistics, Northway Supply, and other shell companies registered to fake addresses. Here are the authentic corporate ledgers, proving Davis Textiles carries zero actionable debt. Here is a digital audio recording of Rick Miller and Roger actively discussing the illegal equity transfer, the exact mechanism for embezzling the corporate funds, and the $8,000 kickback paid to Roger." Andy paused, letting the silence hang in the room. And finally, the sworn affidavits of 3 material witnesses: Martha, the former janitorial staff of the main office; Brenda, the former head of accounting; and Arthur Davis, owner of 40% of the corporation. Rick desperately tried to resurrect his arrogant smile. It came out looking like a painful grimace. "Andy, come on. Are you serious? A stack of printed garbage and some spliced audio file from God knows where? This is a joke. Even in a courtroom, this would get laughed out." "This is not a courtroom," Investigator Thomas interrupted calmly. "This is an active felony investigation. A judge will sort out the details in court. As we speak, a SWAT team and IRS agents are executing a no-knock search warrant on your corporate office and your private residence. Calls to those locations will not go through. Your cell phones have already been seized. They are currently cutting open your floor safes with blowtorches." Rick turned completely white. He collapsed back into the leather chair as if all the bones in his body had suddenly evaporated. Martha stared directly at him. No anger, no gloating, just cold, hard truth. "I was just the cleaning lady, Rick. You talked about all your dirty business right in front of me because you did not even view me as a human being." Rick did not answer. He slowly pulled his reading glasses off his face and placed them on the desk. They hit the wood with a hollow click. Roger whipped his head around to stare at Leah. His face was a chaotic mess of emotions: pure shock, abject terror, and boiling rage. "Leah, what the hell did you do? Do you have any idea what you just did? You just framed your own husband for a federal crime." Leah looked back at him with absolute chilling calm. Deep inside, not a single nerve trembled. "I did not frame you for anything, Roger. You spent 2 years framing yourself." He opened his mouth to scream at her, then snapped it shut. His jaw ground furiously. "He brainwashed you. He dragged you down into his paranoid delusions in a single day." "One day." "One single day," Leah nodded. "Because one day of the truth was more than enough. And 12 years of lies wasn't." The uniformed officer stepped forward. "Stand up, Roger. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. And Mr. Miller, please do not make a scene. The notary has a security camera running, and this is all on tape." Roger stood up mechanically. The officer clamped cold steel handcuffs around his wrists. He did not fight back. He moved like a zombie. As he was being shoved toward the door, he turned his head and looked at Leah one last time. He opened his mouth, trying to find the words to manipulate her one last time, but nothing came out. The officer pushed both men out into the hallway. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind them. Left inside the grand office were Leah, her dad, Martha, Brenda, the notary, and Attorney Hayes. "Mr. Vance took off his glasses and calmly wiped the lenses with a microfiber cloth. "Well, Andy?" The notary said smoothly. "It appears there will be no equity transfer today. Let the record show the transaction is voided. Now, let's draft that emergency injunction to ensure Leah's shares remain legally protected." The notary nodded and pulled a fresh, blank legal form from his drawer. Leah sat frozen in her chair, staring blankly at the mahogany desk, staring at the exact empty space where her signature was supposed to surrender her mother's legacy. Instead, sitting in that space was a thick manila folder containing the state's criminal indictment against her husband. Arthur placed his massive, calloused hand on her shoulder, heavy and radiating heat. Leah reached up and covered his hand with hers. 2 hours later, all the paperwork was finalized and filed with the county clerk. They walked out onto the downtown sidewalk. A weak, pale autumn sun was breaking through the gray clouds. Across the street, a city worker was blowing dead leaves into large piles. Attorney Hayes shook Arthur's hand firmly and hurried back to his office to prep for the arraignment, Brenda gave Leah a brief, no-nonsense hug and marched off toward the bus stop. Martha stood quietly off to the side, a small woman in a cheap winter coat, gripping her canvas tote bag with both hands. Leah turned to face her. "Martha, thank you. I do not even know how to." "It is not necessary," the older woman interrupted, waving her hand. "Your father helped me out years ago. He paid out of pocket for my husband's expensive heart medication when I could barely afford to leave the house. Debts get paid, plain and simple. That is just how the world works." Arthur stepped forward and gently touched the sleeve of Martha's coat. "Martha, I need to talk to you. The records room back at the factory is a total disaster. Rick had them completely destroy our filing system. Come work for us, not pushing a mop. As the head file clerk. Full benefits, a real salary, and your own office." Martha looked at him carefully, then slowly shook her head. "Artie, I am not a spring chicken anymore. I do not need my own fancy office. But I will come down to the records room 3 days a week. Sorting out messy paperwork? That I can do. But I am bringing my own rags. I am used to my own supplies." For the first time in 4 days, which had honestly felt like a decade, Leah let out a genuine, exhausted laugh. Leah moved in with her dad at his house in the suburbs. She went back to the downtown apartment with Roger exactly one time, accompanied by a police escort, to pack her bags. On the kitchen island, she left her wedding ring sitting on top of a post-it note with 3 words written on it: "I am not coming back." Roger had made bail. He was under house arrest, confined to the county limits, wearing sweatpants, desperately trying to talk his way out of it. He begged, he threatened her, then he broke down crying and begged again. Leah ignored him entirely, packed her suitcases in total silence, and walked out the door. She filed for divorce a week later. The federal case against Rick Miller moved quickly. The FBI tracked down every single one of his Delaware shell companies. The IRS audited the company's books going back 3 solid years. Arthur personally renegotiated the healthcare contracts with legitimate regional hospitals, and massive checks started clearing into the factory's real bank accounts. Rick's swanky downtown office was cordoned off with yellow police tape. He was sitting in county lockup, awaiting trial. One crisp afternoon in late November, Arthur walked Leah down the main floor of the manufacturing plant, not as his heir, not as a corporate shareholder, but simply as his daughter. They walked down the massive, cavernous aisle. Dozens of heavy industrial sewing machines roared. The air smelled of raw cotton, hot machine oil, and melting plastic packaging. The seamstresses looked up from their stations and waved at Arthur. He pointed at each of them, calling most of them by their first names. "Over here is the cutting floor. Down there is assembly. That is quality control. And the back is shipping and receiving. See those pallets on the loading dock, honey? Those are heading out to the hospital network tonight. We are running 3 shifts now making scrubs. Navy blue, hunter green, and stark white." Leah listened to him and nodded. Her dad was talking about supply chains and heavy machinery, but beneath every single word, there was a deeper meaning. He was really saying, "I wanted you to see this. I always dreamed of having you by my side. I just never knew how to tell you." Eventually, they reached a small room at the very back of the warehouse. It used to be a dingy supply closet, but it had been totally renovated. It had a nice wooden desk, heavy filing cabinets, a bright desk lamp, and a coffee maker. Pinned to a large corkboard on the wall were meticulously organized index cards, vendors, shipping, archives. Sitting behind the desk was Martha. Her reading glasses hung around her neck on a beaded chain. She was carefully stapling invoices into a manila folder. And sitting on the corner of her clean desk, neatly folded into a perfect square, was the gray, dusty rag. The exact same one. Leah stared at it, then looked up at Martha. "Martha, why in the world did you keep that dirty rag?" "It is a tool of the trade," Martha replied calmly, not even looking up from her paperwork. "You never know when it might come in handy again." Arthur chuckled loudly and slung his heavy arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Come on, honey. It is time for lunch. I had the cafeteria make your favorite meatloaf and mashed potatoes today." They walked back out onto the factory floor. The machines hummed. The women chatted loudly over the noise, and a classic rock radio station blasted from a boombox in the corner. Life was moving forward loud, blue-collar, and finally making sense. Leah walked shoulder to shoulder with her dad down the long concrete aisle, thinking about one very simple truth. Sometimes, the person who saves your life is not a hotshot lawyer, or a blood relative, or the person sharing your bed who you thought was your soulmate. Sometimes, the person who saves you is a woman nobody ever looks twice at, because everyone is way too busy dealing with their own extremely important lives. She just pushes her mop bucket down a quiet hallway, spots someone in unimaginable danger, and shoves a dirty rag into their hands. And that dirty rag is exactly what it takes to make your entire life take a turn in a completely different direction. Thank you for listening to this story. Let us know in the comments if you liked it. For you, it is a simple gesture, but for us, it makes all the difference.